Tonight we begin with a development that senior U.S. officials had feared, intelligence analysts had tracked, and Pentagon strategists had prepared contingencies for. A confrontation that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in a matter of hours. Hours that redefined the balance of power in the Middle East. Hours that sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels from Washington to Beijing. Hours that may have permanently altered the trajectory of U.S.-Iran relations for decades to come. What President Donald Trump did today crossed a line that international mediators had desperately hoped would hold. And when that line broke, Iranian President Pezeshkian did not hesitate. They responded with defiance, precision, and a level of strategic coordination that left Pentagon officials scrambling for answers. This is not speculation. This is not conjecture. This is happening right now. And what we're about to break down for you tonight may be the most significant escalation between Washington and Tehran since the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in January 2020. For several months now, there had been signals, not from official State Department channels, not from formal diplomatic communiques, just signals that President Trump was preparing something unprecedented in his approach toward Iran. Trump has been confrontational with Tehran, yes, but he has been calculated in his confrontation. His moves have followed a certain rhythm, a pattern, almost a predictability that allowed both sides to calibrate their responses. But what set off alarm bells in the Pentagon and Langley this week was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Iranian military communications, diplomatic traffic, and regional proxy movements know the indicators. The sudden repositioning of naval assets in the Persian Gulf. The encrypted communications between Revolutionary Guard commanders, the unusual movement of ballistic missile components, the sudden cancellation of scheduled diplomatic back-channel meetings, all of that went quiet. And whenever both Washington and Tehran go quiet simultaneously, it means something is about to get very, very loud. Senior defense officials speaking on background to major news outlets described the atmosphere in the Situation Room as electric, not with excitement, but with apprehension. Because silence between adversaries of this magnitude doesn't signal peace. It signals preparation. It signals that both sides are holding their breath, waiting for someone to make the first move. And early this morning, President Trump made that move. Early this morning, Eastern Time, the White House Communications Office released what they described as a comprehensive security directive regarding the Islamic Republic of Iran, including language that had not been used in official U.S. government documents in over 4 decades. These are the kinds of ultimatums that American presidents only issue when they are signaling something very specific: imminent military action, complete diplomatic isolation, or regime-level consequences. Analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all 3 at once. But what they didn't know was that Trump was fundamentally changing America's posture toward Tehran. And when an American president shifts posture without warning, without congressional consultation, without allied coordination, even by a small measure, every capital in the world pays attention. The ultimatum, which has now been circulated to allied governments and is being analyzed by intelligence services globally, contains several unprecedented demands. First, the complete and verifiable dismantlement of Iran's uranium enrichment program within 90 days. Second, the immediate withdrawal of all Iranian military advisors and Revolutionary Guard personnel from Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen. Third, determination of all financial and military support to Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi movement. Fourth, the release of all American citizens currently detained in Iranian custody. And fifth, and this is the provision that has Tehran's leadership most alarmed, the formal recognition of Israel's right to exist within its current borders. Pentagon officials described the document as the most comprehensive set of demands ever presented to the Iranian government by any American administration. But demands only carry weight if they come with consequences. And Trump made those consequences explicitly clear. The ultimatum issued by President Trump this morning was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was existential. Official after official, briefing after briefing, described Trump's demands as unprecedented in scope, uncompromising in tone, and perhaps most importantly, backed by specific military consequences that were detailed in classified annexes shared only with senior congressional leadership. Sources familiar with those annexes describe them as containing operational timelines, not theoretical scenarios, but actual deployment schedules, target packages, and escalation protocols. But ultimatums only work if the target hesitates. Iran did not. In fact, their response today was among the most defiant and strategically sophisticated we've seen in the entire history of U.S.-Iran confrontation. Here's what we know. Within 3 hours of the White House releasing Trump's ultimatum, President Pezeshkian convened an emergency session of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. These weren't the routine consultations that followed diplomatic provocations. These were war cabinet deliberations, sessions that Iran only convenes when they are preparing to respond at the highest strategic level. And respond they did. President Pezeshkian, appearing on Iranian state television in a broadcast that was simultaneously translated and distributed to international media, delivered what analysts are now calling the most significant Iranian presidential address since Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's 2005 UN General Assembly speech. Tonight, multiple sources confirmed that President Pezeshkian announced a series of countermeasures that have left Pentagon planners working through the night. First, Iran declared an immediate suspension of all remaining cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, cooperation that had recently been described as minimal but important by nuclear watchdog officials for what analysts believe was verification of Iran's enrichment limitations. Tehran severed that cooperation before Washington could leverage it diplomatically. They withdrew IAEA inspectors from a Natanz facility. They terminated monitoring agreements at the Fordow enrichment plant. They disconnected surveillance cameras at facilities that were supposed to provide transparency into Iran's nuclear activities. In other words, Iran targeted the verification architecture itself, the mechanism that would have confirmed compliance or noncompliance. This is what made Pentagon officials' concerns so urgent. Trump's ultimatum wasn't just symbolic. It was designed to be actionable. It represented the kind of pressure campaign that could force Iranian concessions if Tehran feared the consequences. And Iran, understanding that fully, responded with counterpressure. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't launch missiles at American bases. They didn't seize commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. They eliminated Washington's ability to verify Iranian compliance. They removed the transparency that gave American intelligence confidence in their assessments. And in doing so, they created a strategic fog that makes any future military action exponentially more complicated. Because how do you strike a nuclear program when you no longer know exactly where it stands? And here's where the story becomes even more alarming. Intelligence analysts now believe that Iran's response was designed to test the resolve of American leadership after months of mixed signals from Washington about priorities in the Middle East. Tehran wanted to see whether Trump would follow through with consequences or whether domestic political considerations would force restraint. But instead, something unexpected happened. The Pentagon didn't back down. They accelerated deployments that were so rapid, so comprehensive, that even Iranian military intelligence noticed. You don't get Tehran's attention easily, but today, Washington did. Defense analysts speaking with international media under conditions of anonymity described Iran's strategy as calculated escalation, a way to raise the stakes while maintaining plausible deniability about direct military confrontation. But the United States proved today that they remain both committed to their ultimatum and capable of backing it with force. Pentagon deployments were not only swift, they were positioned so precisely that Iranian commanders found themselves facing American military assets across multiple potential flashpoints simultaneously. That positioning matters because it shows integrated planning. It shows that Washington is not reacting in real time. They are executing a pre-planned response architecture. As reports continued coming in throughout the day, we learned more about the scale of American military repositioning. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group conducted emergency repositioning operations, moving from scheduled exercises to combat-ready positions in the Gulf of Oman. 52 strategic bombers deployed to Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, bombers that had been withdrawn from the region in the last 6 months. Special Operations Command elements operating from undisclosed locations reportedly activated intelligence networks used by American forces to coordinate precision strikes. This wasn't just saber-rattling. This wasn't just diplomatic pressure. This was force projection. This was deterrence through presence. And presence is the one thing Iran has struggled to match since American forces established permanent basing throughout the Gulf region. For every diplomatic advance Tehran has made through back-channel negotiations, Washington has countered with something that demonstrates military superiority. The question now is whether either side will blink before this escalation crosses into kinetic action. Remember, Iran thought the era of American maximum pressure campaigns was over. They thought the Biden administration's reluctance to confront Tehran militarily would continue regardless of who occupied the White House. They thought economic pressure had reached its limits and that Washington lacked the political will for sustained confrontation. They thought regional dynamics, particularly American commitments in other theaters, would prevent focused attention on Iranian activities. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. American military assets are surging toward Iranian borders. Diplomatic isolation efforts are accelerating through emergency consultations with European and Gulf allies. Economic pressure mechanisms are being strengthened through new executive orders targeting Iranian financial networks. And President Trump himself is scheduled to address the nation tomorrow evening in a primetime speech that White House officials describe as comprehensive and consequential. What makes this moment so dangerous and so unpredictable is that President Trump's ultimatum happened at a time when Iran's leadership is under immense domestic pressure. Hardliners within the Revolutionary Guard want escalation to demonstrate strength. Reformist elements within the civilian government want diplomatic engagement to relieve economic suffering. Religious authorities want regime preservation above all other considerations. The Iranian population wants relief from sanctions that have devastated their standard of living. President Pezeshkian is balancing these demands while managing what appears to be genuine surprise at the comprehensiveness of Trump's demands. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. Leaders who feel cornered make unpredictable decisions. And right now, both Trump and Pezeshkian may feel that backing down would constitute political catastrophe. That's the most dangerous configuration in international relations. Two leaders who believe they cannot afford to retreat. The State Department's response statement, now distributed to embassies worldwide, was designed to signal that the United States is not willing to accept continued Iranian defiance without consequences. Senior officials said plainly that Iran's withdrawal from IAEA cooperation was inconsistent with the behavior of a responsible member of the international community. That is diplomatic language for, we view this as confirmation of hostile intent. You don't usually hear that tone from Foggy Bottom unless something serious is at stake. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in a hastily arranged press availability, described the situation as the most significant test of American credibility in the Middle East since the original Iran nuclear deal. He said the administration would not engage in endless negotiations while Tehran continues to advance its nuclear program. He said all options remained on the table, language that in diplomatic terms represents the clearest possible signal of potential military action. And he said America's allies should prepare for a period of heightened tension that will require unity and resolve. Meanwhile, President Pezeshkian addressed the Iranian nation in a forceful, unyielding speech tonight. He said, "The Islamic Republic will not be dictated to by foreign powers. Our sovereignty is not negotiable, and our rights under international law are not subject to American approval." He said, "We have extended our hand in peace repeatedly, only to have it slapped away by those who seek our submission rather than our partnership." And he said, "If America chooses the path of confrontation, they will find that the Iranian nation has prepared for this moment for 45 years. We do not seek war, but we will not flee from it." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a government that understands just how high the stakes have become, and they are statements that make de-escalation extraordinarily difficult. Because how does either side step back from this ledge without appearing weak? Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's response wasn't isolated. Along with the IAEA withdrawal and Pezeshkian's defiant speech, Hezbollah forces in Lebanon also increased their alert status along the Israeli border, with reports of ammunition distribution and forward positioning. Houthi militants in Yemen announced they would expand their targeting of commercial shipping in the Red Sea, explicitly linking their operations to American pressure on Iran. Iraqi militia groups aligned with Tehran increased threatening communications targeting American diplomatic and military personnel in the region. All of this happened within the same 24-hour period. When Iran moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. This is classic Iranian strategic doctrine, what military analysts call axis coordination. The goal is to demonstrate that any American action against Iran will trigger responses across multiple theaters simultaneously. It's designed to make the cost calculation prohibitive. It's designed to force Washington to consider whether striking Iran is worth potentially igniting conflicts in Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf all at once. Pentagon strategists are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing a dramatic acceleration of its nuclear program, moving toward weapons-grade enrichment in a breakout scenario that would change regional dynamics permanently. Another is that Tehran is attempting to create a crisis severe enough to force third-party intervention, potentially from China or European powers who fear regional instability. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to bait the United States into a limited military strike that would unite Iranian domestic opposition behind the regime and generate international sympathy. But today, President Trump took an unexpected card off the table. He didn't soften his language in response to Pezeshkian's defiance. He didn't offer diplomatic off-ramps or face-saving compromises. He didn't signal flexibility on the 90-day timeline. He doubled down. In a post to social media, Trump wrote, "Iran has been given a fair and final opportunity to choose peace. Their response tells the world everything about their true intentions. The United States will act accordingly." That's not negotiation language. That's countdown language. What we're watching now is a test of resolve. Iran wants to see whether American threats will translate into action. The United States wants to show that this administration will not be deterred by Iranian counter-escalation. European allies want to prevent a military conflict that would devastate their energy security and economic stability. And regional partners like Saudi Arabia and the UAE want to prevent an escalation that could draw them into direct confrontation with Iranian proxies. Everyone has something at stake. Everyone has something to lose. And no one appears willing to move first toward compromise. That's the definition of a crisis, when all parties believe they have more to lose from backing down than from pressing forward. Tonight, we've heard from intelligence sources who are now monitoring Iranian military communications in real time. They say there has been a significant increase in encrypted traffic between Revolutionary Guard headquarters and field commanders throughout the region. They say civilian aircraft have been diverted from Iranian airspace, a precautionary measure that typically precedes military operations. And they say Iran's decision to expel IAEA inspectors is likely part of a broader strategy intended to create maximum uncertainty about the status of their nuclear program. But the United States is not deterred. In fact, the Pentagon is accelerating its response. Their actions today, comprehensive, coordinated, and unmistakably forceful, send a message to Tehran that American patience has reached its limit. And it sent a message to American allies that this administration will not repeat what they view as the mistakes of previous approaches to Iranian aggression. As the coming days unfold, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve with their defiant response. But what we do know is that President Trump's ultimatum was delivered with full awareness of the potential consequences. It demonstrated American resolve. It unified regional allies behind a common position. And it forced Iran to reveal the true nature of their intentions regarding nuclear cooperation. What happens next will depend on what both Tehran and Washington do in the next 72 hours. If Iran signals willingness to negotiate seriously, this moment will be remembered as the crisis that finally produced genuine diplomatic progress. If they continue on their current trajectory, the United States has already shown they are prepared for alternatives. They have shown they are ready to respond. The aircraft carriers are in position. The bomber squadrons are deployed. The intelligence networks are active. And the commander-in-chief has made his position unmistakably clear. And tonight, for the first time in years, Tehran appears to be genuinely uncertain about what comes next. The corridors of power in the Islamic Republic are quiet. Too quiet. And when Iran is quiet, it means they are calculating. It means they are choosing their next move with the understanding that it may be the most consequential decision their leadership has ever made. Because tonight, Tehran learned something they should have understood long ago. American ultimatums are not hollow rhetoric. American military capability remains unmatched. And American resolve, when properly directed, is not something any adversary should test. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. The rules of engagement between Washington and Tehran have fundamentally changed. The margin for miscalculation has narrowed to almost nothing. And the next 72 hours may determine whether the Middle East experiences diplomatic breakthrough or military confrontation. We will be here, watching every detail, analyzing every development, and bringing you comprehensive coverage as the next phase of this crisis unfolds. Stay with us.